You are listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. This episode is for mature audiences. The host and guests are not lawyers or physicians.
Welcome to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. Today I have two unusually well-informed guests. Elizabeth Becker and Kelly Ehler are the founders of HiBNB, a marketplace offering cannabis-friendly accommodations and activities. Today, Elizabeth, Kelly, and I are discussing their venture HiBNB and exploring the economics and legalities of cannabis. Elizabeth and Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
So the first question is, I'd like to talk about HiBNB. What services does HiBNB offer?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there with the accommodations and activities. Accommodations being places where you can sleep similar to Airbnb accommodations, but ours are a little bit different because, number one, the guest is allowed to bring their own cannabis, and the host indicates where cannabis smoking is allowed, either inside the unit or on a balcony or veranda or outside the unit. So the host can specify where the smoking is allowed, and sometimes in Canada, the host can also share cannabis, which means that an international traveler can come to Canada, book on HiBNB, and when they get to their room, there's cannabis sitting there waiting for them. So that's the accommodations. Mm-hmm. And then on the activities side, it's a new spin on weekly entertainment. If you want to go out with your friends, suddenly having a Monopoly game in somebody's basement gets a whole lot more fun when you do it with an edible, right? And everybody takes the edible at the same time. So just sort of like doing a makeover for everyday activities in a form of entertainment. So it's people and whatever they're listing right now on our site. We have learn about cannabis and walk with the alpacas, learn how to belly dance, go for a hike to a waterfall and have a home cooked meal, learn how to make bubble hash. Like there's all sorts of really interesting things that people come up with. And then the third thing that we do is offer advertising for cannabis products and brands and retailers and some ancillary cannabis businesses.
Right. And that's interesting because I assume that's on your website, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting because you're almost taking all the roles of a hotel. The idea that you would help people acquaint themselves with the neighborhood and find activities in the neighborhood, have advertising on the TV. You're playing a very similar role there, but it's centered around cannabis. I do have a question. Under what circumstances should I say cannabis and when should I say marijuana? Is there a difference? Are they synonyms?
Yeah, I just want to jump in here because I feel very passionate about it. Cannabis is the new marijuana.
Okay.
Like marijuana is actually not a good word to use anymore. It's associated with illegal. It's associated with sort of a stigma towards it. So it's always cannabis from here on in.
Okay, I'll try to.
Some people always call it weed.
I'll try to catch myself and make sure I say cannabis tonight. So, you are both passionate cannabis advocates. I'll start with Kelly. How did you find that passion?
So I got a lot of background sort of from the finance side, but also in the healthcare. So I've got like a family who are quite active on the nursing side and public health and pharma. And what really attracted me to the cannabis sector, one is the fact that it's this old stigma of here's a plant that has so many redeeming qualities. I mean, first, from an enjoyment perspective, you can never overdose from it, so it's safe. Yeah. Then from a health perspective, there's so many qualities from terms of people with sleep or anxiety. It just kind of helps solve so many issues. So the fact that it's natural and it just it really resonates with me and my entire family sort of health related. And we also get to enjoy it from time to time and get that comforting, chill feeling. Very
good. And Elizabeth?
So how did I come to be a cannabis advocate?
Yes.
I always really was drawn to it. I remember having some funny experiences in high school with my friends, but it wasn't until I moved to Vancouver in the early 90s when I realized that there's a totally different attitude towards it on the West Coast. And people see it as therapeutic. It didn't have this stigma attached to it. And there was this growing feeling that this is something that should not be illegal, right? It should be a right to people because it has so much benefit and it doesn't hurt or harm anybody. And so I sort of built a foundation there. And then when I moved down to California, it was just at around the time that cannabis was legalizing there medicinally. They were the very first ones to do it. So there was a lot of movement and momentum there. And I got involved in it a little bit. I made a cannabis advocacy film at the American Film Institute when I was studying directing there. And then I guess from there on, it's just something that's really resonated with me. I really appreciate connecting with other people when there's cannabis involved. I find it to be sincere and transparent and supportive and accepting people. And I've had an introvert. If I look at it in an introverted way, when I use cannabis, it sort of helps me connect with a deeper side of myself. And sometimes, it helps me tap into like even a smarter, the smarter side of myself, the one that doesn't get filtered through my brain where I have all these doubts and what will they think and what won't they think? So that's how I feel about it.
There's also, I think we talked before the show, of course, and I think there's also a social justice component too, right? This idea that for what many view as a harmless or even beneficial or substance, a lot of people are in prison because of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a big movement in the U.S., right? There's I forget exactly what it's called, but there's a lot of donations and a lot of people who really strive to have those who were incarcerated in the past to be free, because cannabis is legal, and so why should they continue to be sort of incarcerated? And people are recognizing that cannabis is look. There's a lot of research going on with cannabis. It's becoming more widely accepted. So basically trying to take away those old stigmas.
Yes, Steve D'Angelo is leading that, actually, the Last Prisoner Project. Mm-hmm. So he's going around country to country to try to raise awareness. And he says he won't stop until every single person is out of prison who's there for a cannabis offense. He's dedicated his life. He was one of the first people in California to open a dispensary. He had a drive-through dispensary, and he was closed down so many times and was in and out of court. So he is a fighter for cannabis reform.
And that does bring me to the next question that you alluded to, Kelly, and that is that although cannabis is legal in Canada, there are a lot of stigmas attached to it. What are we up against with that?
I think part of what we're doing with HiBNB is we're creating a community, and we're actually looking to put the message out there in terms of the legal market to destigmatize cannabis, to look at it from all the recreational as well as health aspects. That this is it's a legal product, and it shouldn't have the old kind of stereotypes of. I'll refer to Elizabeth's film where back in the 30s when cannabis was going to make you go crazy and do kind of bad violent things, and sort of that kind of stigma sort of stuck around for many decades. And it takes time for people to re-educate themselves that this is a product that is it's not going to harm you. So part of our goal is to with the retailers and the cannabis anybody sort of in the cannabis sector to promote it and say like, hey, this is a safe, good product that people should be able to enjoy freely without judgment.
And so HiBNB is one approach to creating a community like this. How does a property owner list on HiBNB?
It's pretty easy. Yeah. Just go to the website and follow the links that say become a host. It just takes you through a short process asking you about the address. You need to have the description, I think about 100 words of description, and you need to have 5 photos. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty easy to do it. Somebody can go and make a draft. They have to sign up first and make it and keep it as a draft and then go back and revise it if they want to. So you can start it and abandon it and just save and exit. But it's pretty simple.
Yeah, Elizabeth did a wonderful job in terms of creating the site for to make the user experience positive and easy. And obviously, I mean, one of the key things is you have all your standard kind of criteria with like a HiBNB. It's called HiBNB, not Airbnb. But with a lot of the extra information relative to cannabis, so that people can kind of categorize what areas of cannabis is also of interest.
And how does the money work on the site? So a lot of people aren't familiar with, for example, signing up their property for Airbnb. So I imagine there's a lot of parallels with HiBNB, but without assuming they've already been through that process, what are the mechanisms for money flowing to the property owner?
So essentially, funds. Somebody would, like a host or a guest. So if somebody's registered on the site, I mean, no cash kind of exchanges hands until such time as there's an actual booking. And then once the transaction is complete, once the accommodation is complete, then funds. I mean, it's all electronic. Everything is digital. Everything is through secure portals. And then there's basically like an EFT to the host bank account.
Okay, and I know that. Well, let's talk about how things are growing. I know when we spoke before, you had quite a few listings even on that very day. How are things expanding, and how are you financing the effort to grow your business right now?
You want to take it, Kelly?
Well, I was going to say, like, in terms of the growth, you want to talk about kind of like the number of new listings, but on the financing side, yeah, certainly, when we get a number of new listings on the accommodation side, it definitely energizes us to recognize that, we're getting validation of concept. That, as a startup and a new entity going out, that's an unknown. I mean, Elizabeth's been doing amazing in terms of just reaching out, talking to people, doing various digital platforms, social media, to gain awareness of what we're doing, and all that takes time. And so as time has progressed and we're now getting some traction in terms of some listings, it'll certainly help us in terms of talking to potential investors to come into the company.
You recently announced a partnership with something called Super Hog. What role does that play in HiBNB?
I think that's a game changer. Super Hog is enabling us to provide an insurance product to our hosts, and we're going to automatically apply that so that any booking that happens on HiBNB in an accommodation, that host will be covered for 1 million euros of property damage and an additional 1 million euros in liability insurance. So that's a great partnership, and we have made smart choices. I think that Kelly and I balance each other out really well. Kelly's got a great strategic view and huge networks and contacts, and so we've at an early stage made a relationship with a European consultant firm who specializes in short-term rentals, and they're helping us and guiding us to grow the best the way that we can, and to make other partnerships. So one of them is with Super Hog. So now we can, have confidence for our hosts. And the other way that they are helping us to grow is to guide us through the expansion of our site, so that our system can speak to the property management systems, and we can onboard, 50 or 100 listings at once, rather than, a user having to do it one at a time. And through that channel, there's relationships with the different property management companies. So once we have that built on our site, we should be able to onboard the professional host in whatever country becomes legal for cannabis. So it situates us in a really great position for global growth.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, Super Hog, just to kind of reemphasize Elizabeth's point, it is a game changer for us, because being in the cannabis sector, there's always this, in many cases, people won't touch the cannabis sector. So to have the validation of Super Hog and for hosts to know that they've got that protection with the guarantee from them is, it validates what we're doing, but it also gives the host comfort that they're covered.
So one of the arguments that people will make is, okay, well, maybe marijuana is fine, but it's a slippery slope to or excuse me, cannabis is fine, but it's a slippery slope.
It slipped out there.
Did you want to say
I
weed
caught
or pot
myself
too?
before you did.
How about ganja?
Yeah, but it's a slippery slope to other activities. And one of the things, just as a parent, even that crosses my mind is, if my child were to have a joint, then it's really almost goes hand in glove with having a cigarette too. And so there's a health concern, but also as a property owner of a HiBNB listed property, I might be concerned that there was not just marijuana consumption or cannabis consumption, but also cigarette consumption. Do you have any mechanisms to address that? I guess I'll start with the question of, do you think that the habit of having a joint would lead to cigarette smoking? Do you see a connection there?
I want to jump in here because I feel very strongly about it. So this association that cannabis it's a slippery slope into other bad things. Like, what other bad things? Like you said, smoking, or like, well, what other bad things? And is that any more of a slippery slope than watching your dad have a beer or a shot after dinner, or get angry and lose his temper, or have pharmaceutical drugs that they're leaning on? Like, I think that there's some stigma around this cannabis as a bridge to all things negative. If somebody wants to smoke cigarettes, they're going to smoke cigarettes. I mean, people are vaping too. I wouldn't blame it on cannabis. Kids are vaping all the time. Kids are, I don't know if they're smoking so much. Smoking has really sort of been, because it's so unhealthy, but I don't know. Cannabis has so many beneficial things. I wouldn't be afraid of it. I wouldn't be afraid that it's going to lead to the bad, unless you're afraid of what's innate in that's bad in that child or in that person, right? It could tap them into something that's to help them be a better person, to help see themselves from a different point of view. There is the stereotype of the young person not being able to handle the cannabis and smoking all the time and becoming a stoner and, doing poorly in school. I think that legalization of cannabis is going to help that, because it's out of the closet and we're all talking about it. And it's not something that they were getting into bad stuff and not telling you because it's illegal and doing it in their kid, in the basement. It's now that it's legal, it's something that we can all talk about. And what Kelly and I are committed to is normalizing cannabis into somebody's day-to-day life, so that there's no stigma for it. It's just the same as drinking, as having a drink, and even different than that, because it doesn't necessarily get categorized into the same as an intoxicant like alcohol, because so many people use it in a health and wellness level, and to be a painkiller as well.
And just on the other point about, sorry, I was just going to say on the other point relative to cigarettes, I don't have any particular studies, but empirically speaking, I don't see like how one kind of leads to the other. I think if somebody's a cigarette smoker, they're a cigarette smoker. And I've never spoken to or seen anybody who's cannabis, like who likes to smoke cannabis, kind of like makes them want to smoke cigarettes. It's just
okay. Well, and that is a reassurance to HiBNB property owners. Is there also a stipulation in the guest form to say you can do this, but you can't do that? Is there any granularity to what you allow guests to do?
The host can make their own rules. So we defer to whatever the host wants, and each listing is unique to that particular host. Some hosts say no smoking inside the unit. They're fine with edibles. Some are okay with it. And so it's up to the host exactly how they want to make their rules.
Okay. Do you have any guidelines for what kind of properties would make the best HiBNB location? Do you sort of have any recommendations or requirements for what a place would be like?
Yeah, I think that the cannabis community, they want their chill zone, right? They want the pillow lounge. They want to be able to hang around in a really comfy area and chill out, listen to good music, or watch a movie. But so it's just feeling comfortable in a space and something that is sort of conducive to lying around, or anything that's tactile to the senses, like if there's a jacuzzi tub or a fireplace, or a sauna. Cannabis is the people, they want to do things that stimulate the senses.
Fair enough. How many properties are listed now on HiBNB?
I think that there's probably between 35 and 40.
Wow.
Across
Okay.
Canada.
And these are in Canada,
mostly
right?
Centralized in Ontario. Yeah.
And what are your growth plans? What are you hoping to grow to?
Well, we have quite aggressive plans connected to this channel and all the different property management systems that we plan to connect to as we grow larger than Canada. We're already beginning to make some plans to move into the States and make the adjustments to our site that's necessary. So going back to your question was how many listings do we expect to have?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we go back to our like Airbnb, where they had 137,000 listings in Canada, and we said if we could target 1%, that as a target number, sort of initially, that would be achievable within a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, we expect to have 1,000 listings by the end of our first year operating.
Very cool. So what are the laws that affect your business in Canada? Are they provincial? Are they national? What do you have to be conforming to with this business?
Well, there are cannabis laws on a national level, and each province has their own laws as well. For example, the legal age to consume cannabis is different in each province. In Quebec, they don't have any edibles, and you're not allowed to grow. So every province is a little bit different, and but across the board, there's similarities too. So we have a little bit of education on our site, what's different between province and province, and that will grow as we go into different countries. A little tool, and our hosts are also supporting that. So our system is age gated. But it's hard to say, okay, if somebody comes on our site and they're 18, because you have to be 18 in Alberta, but in Quebec it's 21, and we're just expecting that they are going to be honest, and the hosts have to check ID. They have to check ID, so only people who are legal age to consume can use our site and book our listings, and families who want to travel, they can't bring kids.
So one of the things also from a regulatory perspective is, when cannabis, became legal in Canada, the government and Health Canada have been cautious in terms of legislation, in terms of, security protocols, production protocols. And then the big one is also on the advertising, much like smoking, where it's very restrictive in terms of how much you can actually do to promote your product. So it's been, for the licensed producers, anybody who's licensed with Health Canada, it's been a bit, they've been constricted in terms of what they could actually do in terms of helping to build their brand awareness and consumer awareness. And so what we bring to the table is the fact that, we don't sell product, we don't touch the plant, that, we're not licensed. So with Health Canada, so we can actually assist the community in terms of, building that brand awareness and helping them to get their product known in the marketplace.
So you raised something earlier that I wanted to explore, and that is some provinces you can grow and some provinces you can't. And that would, I presume, be even for personal consumption?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's weird, isn't it?
In Ontario, anybody can grow 4 plants, up to 4 plants.
Up to 4 plants.
But in Quebec, you need a license to grow any.
You can, I don't know if it's legal or not, but certainly a lot of people make wine and beer in their basement.
Yeah.
I would be surprised I guess I'm surprised it's not legal to grow it in a country where it's legal to consume it. That seems strange, but anyway.
And that's where a lot of the people, are feeling very angry and, fighting against this. This is a gift, and we should be able to grow it the same way we should be able to grow, peppers in our backyard, and, especially if it's legal in the country.
I think this is just part of the evolution of the industry. I mean, it's been, since the 30s. So you got 70, 80 years of, stigma, and you get legislation that comes in that's restrictive, and, as the legislation gets reviewed every 3 years in terms of what can and can't be done, and every time it's renewed, there's always a further easing of the rules, and further acceptance of the product. And there's a lot of companies who are developing micro kind of plants or planters that you can grow in your own apartment or house.
Right.
So I think that'll just kind of continue to evolve.
And when you say 4 plants, is it really clear what that means? I mean, I'm showing my naive side, but I don't know how big these plants can get. Couldn't you just have one huge plant?
Oh, they can get pretty big.
You cut them down, right? I'm not a grower, so I don't know. I don't know that much more than you do. But you cut them down, you harvest them. So okay. I would assume that one plant is something that has one stalk into the earth.
Actually, they can be pretty big.
Yeah, they can grow.
How far does that go? Like, if I have 4 plants, am I high every night?
I think it's more than you can use yourself.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I recently heard the term cannabis sommelier, which just goes to show that there's so many potential careers and industries that could be intertwined with cannabis. What are some of the new businesses like yours that you see emerging?
Do you have anything in mind, Kelly?
Maybe some of the advertisers. Give them a free plug.
Sure, I will. There's so many of them. I'm sorry. Let's plug them all because they're advertising with us, and that's what we do, right? We want to promote and make a big deal over the people that are coming to advertise with us. We want to support the legal industry. So we have a cannabis community section on our site, and on that it's broken down into different sections. So we have accessories and health and wellness, services related to it. The Pot Away is a product that takes the marijuana, the cannabis odor out.
Busted.
You can use it on your clothes, you can use it on couches, and it totally minimalizes. It just takes it right out of existence. So that's a great product. And we've got a pipe that looks like a cigar. And we really want to support the Canadian entrepreneur, people who are coming up with these really cool ideas. So it looks like a cigar. It's called Regal Cigar. Mm-hmm. And you can pack your cannabis in the end, and it has this sort of long shaft so that you don't burn your throat. And it looks like a cigar, and you can puff away. And that's a cute little product. And then there's some cannabis sommeliers. Mimi Cannabis is an advocate for cannabis use, and her target is the older demographic, above 50. And she's an educator.
How dare you?
I'm included.
Well, the other thing is, there's probably things that'll come out, like there's terpenes, different kind of scents and things for terpenes. I think there's still
terpenes.
Yeah.
What's that, like the oil from the plant, or?
I'm not sure actually how to describe it. It's like an extract. It's very very difficult to extract, and it's very small quantities that come out, and it has different flavoring and effect to cannabis. And there's still a lot of, I think, discovery going on in terms of terpenes, and a lot of the producers of product, they're really kind of experiment with terpenes, and so I could see kind of a lot more work being done in that area. And like bath bombs and things like that were.
Oh yeah.
Well, the bath bombs usually have CBD in them, but terpenes are in other foods too, and they're responsible for a lot of the tastes and smells and some of the effects. And the thing about cannabis is that they all interact differently with one another. So it is hard to extract one and say that this is it, and that's why so many people say you have to really explore when it comes to cannabis to find what's right for you. But so many people just take too much. and become over affected, and then that supports the stereotype of the person sitting on the couch who can't get up.
So I'm going to put a little disclaimer at the beginning of the show, because I don't think any of us are medical experts, but I think we should feel free to talk about our own observations. Is cannabis better for our health than alcohol?
I would say 100% for sure. I mean, I've had stories where I have an employee who, a barber and another person who say cannabis has saved their life in terms of, back pain, arthritic pain, sleep issues, somebody who's older, taking opioids, and like you said, medical disclaimer that, they tend to, cause other issues, whereas cannabis, help foster, better eating habits, better, sort of, you're not constipated. Drinking, dehydration is a problem. So there's a lot of, kind of medical effects that there's a lot of studies going on to prove it. There's a lot of research going on to validate it. But there's a lot of empirical evidence where people have, basically said, this has just kind of changed my life from a health perspective.
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard anybody say that about alcohol.
Right. And you're making the point, of course, the point you're making is that there are not just less negative effects, that there are actually beneficial effects to cannabis. Here, I got it right.
He's reformed.
One thing though, to somebody who's not familiar with cannabis is at least alcohol comes in very consistent packaging and quantities, and you're never going to have a bad trip on a few beers, because exactly how much alcohol is in those bottles. What's going on in the cannabis space when it comes to knowing what you're taking?
Well, this is why the legal industry is a game changer, because it's all regulated. And that when it says 2 milligrams, it's going to be the same effect that something else that says 2 milligrams is. I mean, when you buy something in the black market, which is now called the legacy market, it's not regulated and you don't know what you're going to get. I would say that means it's a big difference, right? All of a sudden, there's a bunch of products that have very small amount of cannabis in it, and you can try them and see what the effect is, and next time try a little bit more. And so that's the government is there to support that type of exploration with it.
And the product will also show what the THC content is and the CBD content. So on the packaging, how many milligrams, and what the THC and CBD content is as well.
So that's interesting, because with alcohol, there's just alcohol. So
there's a percentage in alcohol, that it's 5%.
Oh, sure. But I mean, the fact that there's 2 active ingredients, are there more than 2, or are 2 the main ones to focus on in cannabis?
CBD is non-psychoactive.
Okay.
The THC is the one that's psychoactive. So if you take CBD alone, it's a muscle relaxant, and just sort of has a calming sensation over you, but it doesn't affect your mind in any way. So sometimes if the THC and CBD are mixed, it has a certain effect. Some people like very high THC. They like that psychoactive effect. And some people like it with a higher CBD range.
And you've mentioned a couple of times the notion of a bath bomb. Is that just because people enjoy the smell, or is there actually impact that can be absorbed through the skin? What is the payoff for that?
It's the CBD that I was talking about. That's a muscle relaxant and a calming effect. So there is a physical effect.
Interesting. Okay. So I know that you're not happy with me when I bring up the idea, if this, then that, but I still would like to explore whether it's only cannabis that you're in favor of legalizing. I mean, I know that's not your wheelhouse, your HiBNB, it's about cannabis. But for example, I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss. Do you know who that is? He's a blogger, or a podcaster rather, but his initial claim to fame was the 4-Hour Work Week book. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Anyways, he's a very famous person, partly as a result of that book. And he's become sort of a podcaster who has lots of people on his show from different walks of life. And one of the things he's explored he's begun to explore is things like psychedelics.
Mhm.
Have you, and people are using the same viewpoint, which is that psychedelics like LSD have been stigmatized and made illegal, and yet under certain circumstances and taken under, the argument is that there's some beneficial effects that come from that too.
Yeah, it's actually psilocybin and MDMA that they're looking at. The psilocybin comes from the magic mushrooms, and MDMA is from ecstasy.
Okay.
That would be the street name for it. And they're fast tracking these drugs. It's going to be different than cannabis. With cannabis, they're turning it into a market, a private market, right, where people can sell it, get behind it, make money from it. But with these drugs, the psilocybin and the MDMA, they're going to make it so that it has to be prescribed by a doctor. Mm-hmm. And they have very rigid rules around how it's given. So they want to give it to people to help them with PTSD, and there has to be 2 people there. There has to be a bathroom there, and apparently it can be extremely healing. Okay.
And so because it's on such a different track, it wouldn't be something that would be, it's early days, I guess, but would you consider expanding what HiBNB can offer in terms of consumption of substances?
Well, because we don't touch the plant, right? We don't buy or sell cannabis. All we do is support the community who wants to be able to be acknowledged without having to hide the fact that they use cannabis. I mean, if that community wants to grow, if there's hosts that feel like they need to acknowledge that it's okay if you want to try this here, I don't think that they would be providing it to the person.
Right.
But it's just more about being supportive of it. I would, if that's how the cannabis community and the HiBNB community wanted to grow, I would support it.
So the experience that brought you to this point where you created this business is around cannabis. And so that's sort of the home turf. I don't know if that's a pun or not, but anyway. But do you think to yourself that there might be certain conditions under which you would accept listings that would allow this consumption but not that consumption? Like how would you ring fence it so that you're comfortable with the activities going on?
Well, I think that we support the legal industry.
Okay.
So, I was going to say, it's got to be legal. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a very safe line to follow. I like that.
It's very clear.
So my last question is, if I knew somebody who was uninitiated when it came to cannabis and lived in Ontario, what would you recommend they do if they were, how would they experience cannabis? We'll start with Elizabeth.
Yeah. Hopefully we can both answer it. There's so many different things. It depends on that person, right? I don't know if they would like to smoke or not, but there's different ways to, I would say, drink a beverage. My mother, I gave her a cannabis beverage, and she said, "Oh, I didn't feel a thing." And I said, "Well, that's the thing. You next time have 2." And she was so afraid to take it. She never took it to start. So it depends on the product. There's a vape product, which is easy. But then if you're talking about activities, I would say book on HiBNB and learn about cannabis and go for a walk with the alpacas. Because how much better could that get, right? You learn about it. You have somebody there. You're in a group who can help you navigate, and you're doing something so fun and in nature.
And are all the products through, what is it, the OS? What is the organization, the LCBO equivalent for cannabis?
OCS. Yeah, OCS. Yeah.
Ontario
OCS?
Cannabis Store.
Yeah. Okay. And that's where and do they deliver? Do you have to go into the store? I'm just thinking, during this weird time of COVID, people might be reluctant to go in.
It comes right to your doorstep.
Really? Okay.
It's so much easier to get than alcohol. All you do is go online and order
You're getting rid of all of my friends' excuses. Okay.
You don't have to leave your house.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth and Kelly, for being my guests today.
Well, thank you,
Thanks
Tim.
for having us.
It's been a lot of fun.
Really appreciate it.
Elizabeth and Kelly's contact information, along with a link to HiBNB, will be in the show notes. My name is Tim Hampton, and you can reach me at tim@unusuallywellinformed.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you will subscribe and join me for the next show with another unusually well-informed leader in business and technology.
Thank you for listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. The opinions expressed by the host and guests on the Unusually Well-Informed podcast are their own and do not reflect that of their employer or any other affiliation.